I never thought my marriage would end with me sitting in the ER, staring at my wife, and realizing she wasn't the woman I thought she was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it really began. My wife, Claire, and I had been together for almost 8 years, married for 4. To everyone on the outside, we looked perfect. We had a cozy house in the suburbs, steady jobs, a circle of friends who envied us. People always said things like, "You guys are goals," and for a long time I believed it. But the truth is, perfection has cracks. And ours started showing about a year ago. Claire began pulling away. It wasn't dramatic at first, just little things. Coming home later from work, saying she was tired when I wanted to talk, spending more time scrolling on her phone, less time laughing with me like we used to. I chalked it up to stress. Her job at the hospital was demanding, and I tried to give her space. But deep down, I felt something shift. The first real sign something was wrong happened one Saturday morning. I woke up early, went to make coffee, and noticed Claire's phone buzzing on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't even glance. But that morning, the name flashing on the screen wasn't a coworker or a friend. It was just unknown. She never had calls from unknown. I let it go, but a knot formed in my stomach. Later, when I casually asked, "Hey, who was calling you earlier?" she froze for a second before brushing off. "Oh, probably a wrong number. Don't worry about it." The way she avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. She was hiding something. The weeks that followed were like living with a ghost. She was there, physically, but emotionally she was miles away. We stopped having dinner together. She stopped touching me. No hugs, no kisses, not even brushing my hand when we passed each other. And then there were the nights she didn't come home at all. She'd text around midnight, saying she was stuck on a double shift to the hospital. At first, I believed her. But when it happened more and more, my suspicion grew. I started checking the hospital parking lot on nights. She claimed she was working. Her car wasn't there. When I confronted her, she turned it around on me. "Are you seriously checking up on me? That's controlling, Alex. You're making me feel suffocated." I backed off ashamed. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was losing my mind. But then came a night that changed everything. I had just gotten home from work when my phone rang. It was my buddy, Eric, who worked near a bar across town. "Hey, man," he said carefully. "I don't want to stir up trouble, but I think I just saw Claire." My stomach dropped. Saw her where? At Jake's Tavern. She wasn't in scrubs, and she wasn't alone. I felt my chest tighten. Who was she with? There was a pause. Some guy. They were in a booth, sitting real close. Looked cozy. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands shook as I grabbed my keys and drove across town, heart pounding like a war drum. When I walked into Jake's, I spotted her instantly. She was in the corner booth, her hair down, wearing a dress I hadn't seen in months. And sitting across from her was a man I didn't recognize, his hand resting casually on hers. The sight knocked the air out of me. I walked straight over. "Claire." She looked up, startled, her face draining of color. "Alex, what are you doing here?" "That's my question," I said, my voice low, shaking with anger. "What are you doing here? Who the hell is this?" The guy shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe I should." "Yeah, you should," I snapped. He stood, muttered something under his breath, and left. I turned back to Claire, my chest heaving. "You've been lying to me. For months. Haven't you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It's not what you think. Don't insult me. I've been covering for you, defending you. And all this time you've been sneaking around?" She reached across the table, but I pulled back. "Alex, please. I can explain." I stared at her, disgust boiling in my veins. "Then explain, because right now, all I see is a liar sitting in front of me." She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "It's complicated." "No," I said firmly. "It's actually really simple. You've been cheating." And in that moment, with the bar buzzing around us and my heart breaking in my chest, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. That night, she didn't come home. And for the first time since our wedding day, I wondered if I even wanted her to. The morning after the confrontation was a blur. I woke up with the worst headache of my life. Not sure if it was from the crying, the lack of sleep, or the sheer weight of the decision sitting on my chest. My phone buzzed nonstop through the night. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Emily, even a message from Dad that simply read, "Call me." Now, I didn't. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the carpet, wondering when my own life had stopped belonging to me. Everything was dictated: where I went, who I spent time with, what job I chose, and now even the woman I supposedly loved. Except love didn't feel like this. Love wasn't a cage with silk curtains. Love wasn't built on manipulation and secrets. I knew I had to confront them again, but not the way I had last night. Last night had been emotional, reactive. This time, I needed to be calm, direct. So, I sent a message in the family group chat. We're meeting at 6 tonight. No excuses. Everyone shows up, or I walk away. It was the boldest thing I'd ever sent, and my hand shook after hitting send. Within seconds, the replies rolled in. Mom, we'll be there. Dad, good. About time. Emily, I'm scared, but I'll come. That one word, scared, lingered in my mind all day. What exactly was Emily scared of? My parents' anger? The truth coming out? Or maybe something deeper I hadn't even uncovered yet? The clock moved painfully slow, but when evening came, I was ready. I sat in the living room waiting, a notebook in front of me. I'd written down everything I needed to say, not because I planned to read it like a script, but because I didn't want to lose track of my resolve. They arrived one by one. Mom first, her perfume filling the air before she even sat down. Then Dad, stiff and silent, like this was just another boardroom meeting. And finally, Emily, looking pale, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped bird. I clear my throat. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to get answers. And for once, you're all going to give them to me. Dad leaned back, arms crossed. Watch your tone. No, I said firmly. Not this time. You don't get to control how I talk when my entire life is being ripped apart without my consent. The silence that followed was heavy. I turned to Emily first. Last night, you admitted something. You said you were forced. Explain. What did you mean? Her lips trembled. She stopped looking at Mom and Dad. They'll be furious. I don't care if they are. I snapped. Tell me the truth. She looked down, tears slipping from her lashes. They made me keep you close. Every text I sent, every smile, every little thing. It was because they said I had to. They told me if I didn't, they'd ruin my life. My career, my reputation, everything. I felt my chest tighten. Ruin your life? How? Emily looked at Dad, then back at me. Your father has connections. You know that. He threatened to make sure no company would hire me. No school would recommend me. No one would trust me again. He said he could make me disappear without ever touching me. I turned slowly to Dad. You did that. He didn't flinch. I did what needed to be done. That girl would have left you eventually, and you're too blind to see it. I protected you from heartbreak. I made sure she stayed. My hands clenched into fists. That's not protection. That's blackmail. Emily sobbed. I tried to leave, I swear. But every time I pulled away, they reminded me of what they could do. So I stayed. But it wasn't just for me. It was for you too. I didn't want you to get hurt by what they do if I really walked away. The betrayal sank deeper. Not just that my parents had manipulated her, but that she had played along, even if unwillingly. Every memory I had with her suddenly felt contaminated. I turned to Mom. And you? What was your role in this circus? I turned to Mom. And you? What was your role in this circus? She pressed her lips together. I guided Emily, told her what to say, how to act. I wanted her to fit into this family, to be the perfect match for you. You mean you wanted her to be the puppet you could control? I spat. Her face hardened. You don't understand what it's like to build a family reputation from nothing. To climb to where we are. One wrong move, one scandal, and everything falls apart. You think love is enough? Love doesn't put food on the table, doesn't protect you from people waiting to tear you down. We ensured stability. The word stability made my stomach turn. They hadn't cared about me, not really. They cared about appearances, about power, about control. So all of this, every kiss, every date, every damn moment, was manufactured. I asked, my voice breaking. Emily shook her head desperately. Not all of it. Somewhere along the line, it stopped being just what they told me to do. I did fall for you, I swear. But I was too scared to admit the truth because I thought you'd hate me for it. I stared at her, searching her face for sincerity. Did she mean it? Or was this just another performance? Another line fed to her by my parents? The room spun, my thoughts colliding like shards of glass. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to hold onto the girl I thought I loved. But another part screamed that this was all too neat, too rehearsed. I stood abruptly. I can't do this anymore. I can't tell what's real and what's fake. You all wanted to control me, and maybe you succeeded for a while. But it stops here. Tonight, Mom's voice sharpened. And what will you do without us? You think you can survive on your own? You're nothing without this family's name. I looked her dead in the eye. Then watch me prove you wrong. The silence that followed was suffocating, but I didn't wait for their replies. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving them in their perfect little fortress of lies. But as I drove away, my phone buzzed. A single message from Emily. There's something else you don't know. Meet me tomorrow, alone. Please. And just like that, the storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The message on my phone burned into my vision. We know where you are. Stop digging, or you'll regret it. For a full minute, I just stood outside the cafe, staring at the screen while cars passed by and people walked in and out, oblivious to the storm unraveling in my chest. My first thought was paranoia. Maybe it was some scam text, just terrible timing. But deep down I knew. It was them. My parents already knew Emily had spoken to me. I shoved my phone in my pocket and walked fast in my car, scanning every shadow like something might leap out. By the time I shut the door and locked it, my breathing was ragged. I sat there gripping the wheel, thinking about everything Emily had told me. The spying, the letters, the plan to use me as some poster boy for their empire. And now this threat. My own family was warning me off. It hit me then. I wasn't safe. Not really. Not until I had enough to expose them. The next week was a blur of secrecy. I started digging into old files from my father's company. Emails, board documents, financial records. I'd grown up thinking his empire was untouchable, this monolith of power and wealth. But once I started peeling back the layers, I saw cracks everywhere. Shady deals, shell accounts, backdoor payments. And Emily's letters backed it all up. They weren't just pushing her to spy. They were orchestrating a system of manipulation that went beyond us. I found references to other people too. Business partners, even employees, all bent into submission. Every night, I hid the evidence I gathered in a locked folder on a cloud server under an alias. If something happened to me, I wanted it all to go public. But with every step forward, the pressure mounted. It started small. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night, silence on the other end. My car tires slashed in the driveway. Then came a note slipped under my door. Family stays loyal. Or family disappears. I didn't need to ask who sent it. The sick part? They weren't even subtle anymore. My father cornered me during one of his weekly family dinners. Leaning in so close, I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. You think you're clever, he murmured, his smile wide for the guests around us. But you're my son, my blood. Everything you do, I know before you do it. Don't test me, Alex. You'll lose. I smiled back, pretending like he hadn't just threatened me in plain sight. That was his specialty, poison in a glass of wine. But inside, I was boiling. The only thing that kept me sane was Emily. Against all odds, she stuck by me. She knew the risks. Hell, she was risking more than me by staying, but she refused to walk away. I owe you the truth now, she told me one night as we sat in her tiny apartment, blinds drawn tight. After everything I did, I need to help you finish this. I wanted to believe her. A part of me still screamed that she had been the one lying to me for years. But when I saw her break down, shaking with guilt and fear, I knew she wasn't acting anymore. She was trapped too. We were both casualties of my parents' obsession. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I was driving home from work when a black SUV cut me off on a back road. Before I could react, 2 men stepped out, dressed in suits, faces blank. One tapped on my window with something metallic. "Step out." "Alex," he said calmly. I didn't move. My chest was heaving, panic flooding every nerve. The other man leaned closer. "Your father sends his regards. This is your last warning." He smashed my side mirror with the metal object, brass knuckles. Maybe. Then both of them walked back to the SUV and drove off, leaving me shaking in the dark. I sat there gripping the wheel, knowing exactly what they meant. I wasn't just being threatened anymore. They were showing me how easily they could reach me. And that was it. I couldn't wait any longer. That night, Emily and I uploaded everything. The letters, the financial documents, the recordings I'd secretly taken of my father's threats. We sent it all to a journalist known for tearing down giants. Then, for insurance, I scheduled the files to release automatically if my account went silent for more than 48 hours. The next morning, the storm hit. News outlets ran with the story, corporate empire built on fear and blackmail. My father's name was plastered everywhere. The board panicked, shareholders revolted, and the government opened investigations. For the first time in my life, my parents looked powerless. My mother called me, sobbing, begging me to stop the madness. My father left me a voicemail so venomous I deleted it halfway through. And then, silence. No more calls. No more warnings. Just silence. It should have felt like victory. But standing in the middle of my empty apartment, watching the world tear apart the empire I grew up under, all I felt was hollow. Because in destroying them, I destroyed myself too. My name was tainted, my career hanging by a thread, my family bonds burned to ash. The only thing I had left was Emily. She squeezed my hand as we watched the news together. It's over now. You're free. But I wasn't sure free was the right word. Maybe I'd never really be free from the scars. Still, ich chose tous. I chose to cut the strings. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that sometimes freedom costs everything. And to those of you listening, stories like this take a lot out of me to share and put together. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button. It genuinely gives me the motivation to dig into more stories, to bring you the ones that keep you on the edge, wondering how much of it could be happening behind closed doors. Your support is the reason I can keep going. They say you never really know the person you marry until years down the road. For me, that truth didn't come in years. It came in one night, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. My wife, Jenna, and I have been married for 6 years. We met in college. She was the lively one, the kind of girl who could light up a room just by walking in. I was the quieter type, steady, grounded, always the listener. Somehow that balance worked. She made me laugh. I made her feel safe. At least that's what I thought. For a long time, things felt good. We weren't perfect. Who is? But we had our rhythm. I worked a 9 to 5 at a financial firm. She taught art classes at a local community center. Evenings were dinners together. Sometimes a movie, sometimes just her sketching while I read. We weren't flashy, but we were solid. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The first sign of trouble came about a year ago. Jenna started staying later at work. At first, it seemed harmless, extra grading, setting up projects for her students. I didn't think much of it. She loved her work, and I admired that. But then it became every week, then multiple nights a week, then weekends. One night, when she came home well past midnight, I casually asked, "Hey, do you ever get paid for all this overtime?" She laughed, brushing it off. "It's not about money, Alex. You know that. It's about passion. I want to give my students more." Her words sounded noble, but the way she avoided eye contact made me uneasy. Still, I shoved it down. She was my wife. Why would she lie? But it wasn't just the hours. She changed. Jenna had always been affectionate, quick to hug me, to lean against me on the couch, to grab my hand in the grocery store. But suddenly, she was distant. She pulled away from my touch. She slept on the far edge of the bed. I tried to tell myself it was stress. Maybe she was overwhelmed. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew something was wrong. Then there was the phone. She used to leave it lying around without a second thought. Lately, it was glued to her hand or hidden in her bag. She'd tilt the screen away if I walked by. I'd hear the buzz of a text, watch her glance down, and then slip it face down on the table. I confronted her once, lightheartedly, trying not to sound paranoid. "Who are you texting all the time?" She forced a laugh. "Oh, just my friend Carla. You know how chatty she is." Except I didn't know Carla, and she wasn't chatty. She was the kind of person who'd forget to reply to texts for days. That night, lying awake beside her, I stared at the ceiling and felt something cold settle in my chest. The turning point came on our 6th anniversary. I'd planned a surprise dinner. reservations at our favorite Italian restaurant, the one we used to go to when we were broke college kids and could barely afford to split an appetizer. I left work early, picked up flowers, even bought a new shirt because I wanted the night to feel special. When I called her to say, "Hey, be ready by 7, she hesitated. "Oh, I actually promised the kids at the center I'd stay late tonight. I can't just cancel on them." I froze. "Jenna, it's our anniversary." Silence. Then a sigh. "I am sorry, Alex. We can celebrate tomorrow, okay? Rain check. Rain check. On our anniversary." I didn't argue. I just hung up, feeling the flowers wilt in my hands. But I couldn't let it go. Something in me snapped. I needed to know the truth. Instead of going home, I drove to the community center. Her car wasn't there. My pulse kicked up. I waited 15 minutes, convincing myself maybe she parked somewhere else. Then I called the center's main office. A tired-sounding janitor answered. "Hi, is Jenna still there?" She told me she'd be working late. The janitor chuckled. "Nobody's here but me, buddy. Place closed at 6. My throat went dry. I hung up and sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My wife was lying to me. Not just little lies. Big ones. On our anniversary, no less. And suddenly, every late night, every excuse, every tilted phone screen came crashing down on me. I didn't go home right away. I drove around aimlessly for hours, my chest tight, my head spinning. When I finally pulled into our driveway around midnight, her car was already there. I walked inside quietly. She was in the kitchen, humming softly, putting dishes away like nothing was wrong. "Hey," she said brightly, too brightly. "You're home late." I just stood there, staring at her, feeling like I was looking a stranger. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice low. She blinked. "I told you. I had to stay late at the center." My heart pounded. "Don't lie to me, Jenna." I called. "The place closed at 6. You weren't there." Her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Alex, I snapped. "Don't feed me another story. Just tell me the truth." For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the fridge. Then she lowered her gaze, her shoulders slumping. "I can't do this right now," she whispered. And before I could stop her, she brushed past me and went upstairs. I stood frozen in the kitchen, fists clenched, my whole world tilting sideways. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment of the past year, every red flag I'd ignored. I thought about following her the next time she worked late. I thought about confronting her with evidence. But the worst part? A small part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was some explanation that would make sense of it all. Still, deep down, I knew. The woman I thought I married wasn't the woman standing beside me anymore. And by the time the sun came up, I made a decision. The next time she lied, I'd be ready. I remember that night vividly, like it's been burned into my mind. After finding out about my brother and his scheming, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were racing, every scenario playing out in my head. Would he really go that far? Would he actually try to steal everything that was meant to honor Dad's memory? And the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. All the late-night meetings, the sudden interest in the will, the fake smiles he gave me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He wasn't just being careless. He was planning something big. The next morning, I walked into the lawyer's office with an uneasy knot in my stomach. Mr. Hanley, Dad's longtime attorney, gave me this hesitant look as if he already knew something was off. He slid the papers across his desk and said, "I need you to read this carefully before you sign." At first, I didn't understand. The paperwork looked normal, but as I read through it, my heart sank. The terms had been altered, not drastically, but just enough that I knew this wasn't Dad's original wish. Instead of the inheritance being divided fairly, with a large portion set aside for the scholarship fund in Dad's name, almost everything was redirected straight into my brother Mark's control. My hands trembled as I looked up at Mr. Hanley. This isn't what Dad wanted. He told me himself, before he passed, that he wanted to leave a legacy, something that would help others. He never would have just handed everything over to Mark. Mr. Hanley's expression tightened. I thought the same, but the instructions were delivered to me with your father's signature. If you're telling me this doesn't align with what he said, then someone's meddling. That was the confirmation I didn't want, but desperately needed. Mark had forged it. I left the office shaking, my anger bubbling over. The betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about erasing Dad's dream, about spitting on everything he worked for, and I knew I couldn't let it slide. When I confronted Mark, he didn't even bother to deny it. He just smirked at me, that same smug grin he'd worn since we were kids whenever he thought he'd won. "Why are you acting surprised?" he said casually, leaning back on a leather chair at his office. "Dad's gone. It's survival of the fittest now. He might have wanted to waste money on some silly scholarship fund, but I'm not about to throw millions away on strangers. This family comes first." I stared at him in disbelief. Family? Do you even hear yourself? You don't care about family. You care about control, about being the one in charge, like you always wanted. Dad trusted us, and you spit on that trust. How do you live with yourself? He leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Easy, because I'm not stupid like you. You've always been too soft, too willing to play the hero. That's why I'll always win, and you'll always lose." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not just the trust between us. It was the realization that my own brother had chosen greed over blood. The next few weeks became a blur of legal battles, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. I gathered every shred of evidence I could, combing through emails, texts, and financial records. I discovered trails he hadn't bothered to cover. Meetings with shady notaries, last-minute changes to Dad's documents, even wire transfers that linked back to his personal account. Each new piece of evidence was like another knife in my back, but it also fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for Dad's will anymore. I was fighting for justice. When the case finally went to court, I'll never forget the look on Mark's face when the evidence was presented. For once, his cocky confidence slipped. The judge's words cut through the courtroom like steel. "This document is fraudulent. The will shall revert to its original form." I thought that would be the end of it. That maybe, after losing in front of everyone, Mark would finally back down. But I was wrong. That night, he showed up at my house unannounced. His face was red, his fists clenched. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You ruined everything," he spat. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That money was mine. I deserved it." I shook my head. "You never deserved a dime of it. Not like this. You tried to erase Dad's legacy, and you thought I'd just let you? You're lucky the judge didn't press criminal charges." For a moment, he just stood there, breathing heavily. And then he whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. "This isn't over. You think you've won, but I'll make sure you regret this for the rest of your life." I'll admit, those words haunted me. I started checking over my shoulder whenever I left the house. I double-locked my doors at night, because I knew he wasn't bluffing. But here's the thing about betrayal. It cuts deep, but it also steals you. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. Not after everything I'd already fought for. Months passed, and while Mark tried every trick in the book to get back at me, spreading rumors, turning some relatives against me, even sabotaging parts of my work, I stayed firm. And slowly, people started to see the truth. His lies unraveled. His allies drifted away. The last time I saw him was at Dad's memorial scholarship ceremony. I was on stage giving a speech about Dad's vision, the way he wanted his legacy to live on through others. I glanced at the crowd and saw Mark standing in the back, arms crossed, his face twisted with bitterness. For a second, our eyes locked. I thought he might make a scene, but he didn't. He just turned and walked out. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Sometimes I wonder if he'll ever change. If he'll ever realize that he lost more than money. He lost his family, his reputation, everything. But then I remember his words, the hatred in his voice, and I know the answer. The betrayal still stings. It probably always will. But when I look at the students who receive scholarships in Dad's name, when I hear their stories and see the way his legacy lives on through them, I know I made the right choice. And maybe that's the thing about betrayal. It can destroy you if you let it. Or it can be the fire that pushes you to fight harder, to stand taller, and to make sure the people you love are honored the way they deserve. Because in the end, I didn't just save Dad's legacy. I saved myself. If you stayed with me this far, it means you felt something in this story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because there are more stories like this, and I promise you don't want to miss what's coming next. When I tell you that I should have seen the signs, I'm not exaggerating. Looking back, they were everywhere, flashing like neon lights, but love, or maybe blind trust, made me ignore them. You know how sometimes you think you know a person better than anyone else, only to find out later you didn't know them at all? That's exactly what happened to me. It started with little things. My wife, Emily, was coming home later than usual from work. At first, it seemed harmless. She had just been promoted, and the new responsibilities made sense. She brushed off my concerns with that sweet laugh of hers, the one that always disarmed me. "Don't worry," she'd say. "I'm just staying late to impress the boss." But then it became more than late nights. She started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. She'd turn it face down at dinner, jump when I walked into the room unexpectedly, and sometimes she'd take calls in the bathroom with the water running. I told myself I was overthinking. We'd been married for 7 years. We had a home together, memories, and plans for the future. Surely, she wouldn't betray all of that. Surely, she loved me as much as I loved her. But deep down, a gnawing doubt began to grow. One night, she came home smelling of cologne that wasn't mine. That's when the pit in my stomach turned into full-blown dread. I wanted to confront her right then, but fear held me back. Fear that if I asked the question, I'd hear an answer I wasn't ready for. So instead, I started watching. I became the person I never wanted to be, the suspicious husband. I checked her mileage when she left. I glanced at her phone whenever she left it unattended, which was rare. And I even followed her once when she said she was heading to a late meeting. What I found made my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She wasn't at the office. She wasn't even near downtown where her company was. She was at a dimly lit restaurant, sitting in a booth with a man I'd never seen before. They weren't just having dinner. His hand was on hers. Their faces leaned close, laughter spilling between them like they were the only two people in the world. I sat in my car, frozen. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing, but the truth was right there in front of me. Emily was having an affair. For days after, I went through the motions of life like a ghost. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to pack my bags and leave, but a part of me still needed proof. Concrete proof. Because if I confronted her without it, she'd twist the story, gaslight me, make me believe I was paranoid. So I started gathering evidence. Screenshots of suspicious messages, photos of her at the restaurant, even recordings of phone calls where she whispered in the hallway late at night. Every piece I collected felt like a knife in my chest, but I kept going. Then came a night everything boiled over. I waited until she came home late again, this time wearing a dress I hadn't seen before, her lipstick smudged like she'd been kissed. She tossed her purse on the counter, humming softly, like she didn't have a care in the world. That's when I confronted her. "Where were you tonight?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She blinked, startled, then forced a smile. "I told you, babe. Work dinner." I shook my head and slid my phone across the counter. On the screen was a picture I'd taken of her and the man at the restaurant the week before. Her face drained of color instantly. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she whispered, "You followed me?" "Don't turn this on me," I snapped. "How long, Emily? How long have you been lying to me?" Her eyes darted to the floor, her shoulders trembling. "It's not what you think." "Don't." I cut her off. "Don't insult me with that cliche. I have the texts. I have the calls. I know everything." Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. "Not this time. It was a mistake," she choked out. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "A mistake." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. Sneaking around, meeting another man, sleeping with him. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time, she looked small, fragile. But I didn't feel sympathy. All I felt was the crushing weight of betrayal. Finally, she lifted her head and whispered, "I love him." The words hit harder than any punch. I braced myself for denial, for excuses, maybe even for begging. But not that. Not her admitting she loved someone else. I staggered back, my chest tight. Then why stay with me? Why keep lying? Her eyes glistened with guilt. "Because I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to leave. I thought maybe it would fade, but it didn't. It only grew stronger." That was the moment I realized my marriage was already dead. I left that night, crashing at a friend's place because I couldn't bear to be under the same roof. Over the next few weeks, divorce papers were filed, belongings were split, and our life together unraveled thread by thread. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. You'd think betrayal ends with heartbreak and moving on. But Emily's betrayal wasn't just about love. It was about money too. Because as I sifted through our shared finances, preparing for the divorce, I noticed massive withdrawals from our joint account. Thousands of dollars gone, siphoned over the course of months. At first, I thought it was normal expenses I hadn't noticed, but then I traced the transactions, and my blood ran cold. The money wasn't being used for bills or savings. It was being funneled into a new account under Emily's name. And worse, there were payments tied to her lover. Vacations, hotel stays, even a down payment on a condo in another city. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd been using our life savings to build a future with him. That's when the rage took over. I confronted her again, this time not with hurt in my voice, but with fire. You think you're walking away from this clean? You think you get to destroy our marriage, steal our money, and ride off into the sunset with him? Think again. She froze, her face pale. It's not what you think. Don't. I cut her off again, my voice sharp as steel. I've got every record, every withdrawal, every payment. You're not just a liar, Emily. You're a thief. She tried to plead, to spin some story about how she needed to escape, how the money was for starting fresh. But I didn't buy a word of it. By the time my lawyer got through with her, Emily wasn't the one walking away with everything. She walked away with nothing. But even after the papers were signed, the house sold, and the accounts split, the betrayal still haunted me. It wasn't just the loss of love or even the money. It was the realization that the person I trusted most in the world had been plotting against me behind my back. And just when I thought it was over, I learned one more thing. Emily wasn't done with me. Not by a long shot. I thought it was over. The divorce was final, the assets were split, and Emily had slinked away with her lover into whatever fantasy world they'd built on lies. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Like I could finally start stitching my life back together. But peace is a way of being temporary when betrayal runs deep. It started with anonymous emails. Short, sharp messages that appeared in my inbox at odd hours of the night. You'll regret what you did to her. She deserved better than you. We know what you did. At first, I brushed them off. Just trolls, I figured. Maybe her friends or family, angry that I didn't just roll over and let Emily take everything. But then the emails turned into texts. My phone number, which I'd never given out beyond my circle, started lighting up with threats. And then one night, as I was leaving the office, I noticed a car idling at the far end of the parking lot. Headlights off, but I could feel eyes on me. I walked faster, keys clenched between my fingers, and when I slid into my car, the other vehicle roared to life, tailing me for several blocks before disappearing into the night. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress was making me see shadows where there were none. But deep down, I knew better. Emily wasn't done with me. It all came to a head 2 weeks later. I came home one evening to find my apartment door unlocked. My stomach dropped. I always triple-checked the lock before leaving, but now the door creaked open with the faintest push. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed at first glance. No broken windows, no ransacked shelves. But when I stepped into the living room, my blood turned to ice. On the coffee table sat a manila envelope. My name scrawled across the front in red marker. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside were photographs. Me walking to my car. Me sitting at my desk through my office window. Me asleep in my own bed. Someone had been watching me. And tucked at the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note. This isn't over. You ruined her life. Now we'll ruin yours. I staggered back, ball rising in my throat. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was stalking, intimidation, a threat that things could get much worse. I did the only thing I could think of. I called the police. But their response was lukewarm at best. Unless they physically harmed you, sir, there's not much we can do, the officer said, scribbling half-hearted notes. Keep your doors locked. Maybe install cameras. Cameras, as if that would protect me from whoever had already been inside my home. Still, I installed them. I set up security at every entrance, carried pepper spray in my pocket, and started glancing over my shoulder every time I left the house. But paranoia doesn't stop reality. A week later, I got a call from my lawyer. "You're not going to like this," he warned, his voice grim. "Emily's filed a new claim against you." "What?" I snapped. "For what? We're already divorced." He sighed. "She's alleging financial misconduct. Claims you hid assets during the divorce." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's insane. She's the one who drained our account for her boyfriend. I got proof of that." "Doesn't matter," he said. "She's spinning it as though you manipulated her into giving up her share unfairly. If the court takes her side, you could be on the hook for more money." Rage coursed through me. This woman had already destroyed our marriage, drained our savings, stalked me, and now she was trying to bleed me dry in court. But this time I was ready. I gathered every shred of evidence: bank statements, withdrawal records, screenshots of her transactions with her lover. I even hired a private investigator who dug up proof that Emily had been siphoning funds long before the divorce. By the time we stepped back into court, my lawyer and I had a fortress of documentation. Emily, on the other hand, walked in looking smug, her lover trailing behind her like a shadow. She tried to spin her story, painting herself as the victim of manipulation. But when the judge saw the paper trail, the tide turned fast. Not only did she lose her claim, but the court ordered her to repay a portion of the money she had stolen. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to send her reeling. Her mask cracked in that moment. As we walked out of the courtroom, she glared at me with a venom I'd never seen before. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll pay for humiliating me." And for a while, I believed her. The emails, the texts, the stalking, they all intensified after that. It felt like I was living in a nightmare that would never end. But then, just as suddenly as it began, it all stopped. No more emails. No more strange cars outside my building. No more envelopes left on my table. I later learned through a friend of a friend that Emily's new relationship had imploded. Her lover had left her, taking what little she had left. She'd moved back in with her parents out of state, broke and bitter. And me? I was finally free. But freedom doesn't erase scars. Even now, years later, I still double-check my locks every night. I still glance at the rearview mirror more than most people. And sometimes when my phone buzzes unexpectedly in the middle of the night, a part of me still braces for the worst. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break your heart. It rewires your brain, makes you question trust, safety, even your own instincts. But it also teaches you. It teaches you that you can survive things you thought would kill you, that you can rebuild after devastation, that even when the person you loved most tries to destroy you, you can rise again. So if you're listening to this and you've been through something similar, know this: you're not alone. The pain feels endless now, but one day it will be just a story you tell. A scar, not an open wound. And if you've stuck with me all the way to the end, thank you. Sharing these stories takes a lot out of me, but knowing people are listening makes it worth it. Every time someone subscribes, it feels like proof that these stories matter, that my voice matters. It gives me the motivation to keep going, to keep opening up, and to keep bringing more real stories like this your way. So if you want to hear more, hit that subscribe. It means more than you know. I never thought my younger brother would be the one to betray me. Friends? Sure, I've lost a few along the way. Girlfriends? Of course, heartbreak is part of life. But your own brother, the person you grew up with, shared a room with, defended on the playground, that kind of betrayal cuts deeper than anything else. His name is Mark, 2 years younger than me. And for most of our lives, I thought we were inseparable. We played on the same little league team, pulled pranks together, even got grounded together more times than I can count. Our parents always said, no matter what, you boys stick together. And for a long time, I believed that. When I got married to Lisa, I was proud to have Mark as my best man. He gave his heartfelt speech at our wedding about how he always looked up to me, how I was his role model, and how he couldn't wait to see the life Lisa and I built together. I remember tearing up because it felt so real, so genuine. If only I'd known. At first, nothing seemed off. Mark would come over a lot, sometimes to watch football with me, sometimes just to hang out. Lisa always welcomed him with open arms. He's family, she'd say, smiling as she set out extra snacks. And I love that about her. She didn't just marry me, she embraced the people I loved too. But over time, little things started gnawing at me. I'd walk into the room and find Lisa and Mark laughing together, their heads a little too close. Or he'd compliment her dress, her hair, the way she cooked, in a tone that didn't feel brotherly. At first, I shrugged it off. I mean, come on, it's Mark. My brother. My flesh and blood. He'd never crossed that line, right? Then came the night that changed everything. I'd been working late on a big project. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. The house was dark, but as I slipped inside quietly, I noticed something odd. Mark's car parked down the street. I frowned. Maybe he'd crashed on our couch again after watching TV. But when I walked in, the living room was empty. No Mark. No blanket on the couch. The TV was off. Confused, I headed upstairs. That's when I heard it. Whispering. Muffled laughter. Coming from my bedroom. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. But as I crept closer, the sounds grew clearer. My wife's voice, low and playful. My brother's, answering her. And then, the unmistakable creak of my bed frame. I froze in the hallway, my entire body trembling. My mind screamed at me to burst in, to catch them in the act, to end it right there. But my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, listening to the betrayal happening just feet away. When I finally forced myself to push the door open, the scene seared itself into my memory forever. Lisa and Mark, tangled in the sheets, gasping as they realized they'd been caught. The look on their faces, pure shock, guilt, and a flicker of fear, was something I'll never forget. "Jake," Lisa stammered, clutching the blanket to her chest. "It's not. Don't." I snapped, my voice shaking with rage. "Don't you dare insult me with excuses." Mark scrambled out of bed, fumbling for his clothes. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." I cut him off. I saw enough. The betrayal was so raw, so overwhelming, I couldn't even process it fully in that moment. My brother, my wife, the two people I trusted most in the world. I walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't throw punches. I just walked out because if I stayed another second, I wasn't sure what I might do. That night, I slept in my car. The next morning, I packed a bag and left. For days, I ignored their calls, their texts, their desperate attempts to explain. What explanation could possibly justify that? There was none. Eventually, I met with Lisa face to face, not because I wanted to, but because I needed answers. She cried, begged, said it just happened, that she never meant to hurt me. But the part that destroyed me was when she admitted it wasn't the first time. It had been going on for months. With my own brother. I sat there, numb, as she poured out her confessions. The stolen kisses when I wasn't looking, the innocent hangouts that turned into something more, the times I thought Mark was just stopping by to see me, but he was really there to see her. Every memory I had of the past year twisted into something ugly, something false. I told her it was over, that there was no coming back from this. Then I confronted Mark. He couldn't even look me in the eye. "I'm sorry," he mumbled over and over, like the word meant anything. I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean for it to happen? You had months to stop, months to tell me the truth. You chose this. Every damn time. Our parents were devastated when they found out. Mom cried for days, begging me not to cut Mark out completely. "He's your brother," she pleaded. "Family makes mistakes." But this wasn't a mistake. This was betrayal. I filed for divorce. I cut ties with Mark. As far as I was concerned, I no longer had a wife or a brother. Just ghosts where they used to be. But here's the thing. I thought walking away would be the end of it. That once I left them behind, I could start healing. I was wrong. Because not long after, I learned that Lisa and Mark weren't done with me. Not by a long shot. When I thought I had finally cut the cord, when I believed leaving both Lisa and Mark behind would mean peace, I underestimated how twisted betrayal can become when it festers. For a few weeks after the divorce papers were filed, I tried to rebuild. I rented a small apartment, threw myself into work, and stayed busy enough that I didn't have to think about them. But no matter how hard I tried, reminders lingered. A certain song on the radio, a street we used to walk down together, even the smell of Lisa's favorite coffee creamer when I passed it in the grocery store. And then came the real gut punch. They didn't just betray me once, they were still together. I found out through social media. One of Lisa's friends posted a group picture at a barbecue, and there they were. Lisa smiling, her hand resting comfortably on Mark's knee like it was the most natural thing in the world. My brother, leaning into her, grinning like a man who'd won a prize. Seeing it was like being stabbed all over again. It wasn't just an affair. They had become a couple, openly, like my life had been nothing more than a stepping stone for theirs. At first, I told myself I didn't care. Let them rot together. But deep down, the betrayal burned hotter. Not only had they destroyed me, they were flaunting it. The worst part? My parents. They were torn, caught between their two sons. Dad was furious with Mark, but Mom still clung to the idea of forgiveness. She started inviting them both over to family dinners, trying to pretend things weren't broken beyond repair. She begged me to come, saying, "Jake, please, we're still a family. Don't make me choose." But wasn't it already clear who she had chosen? I refused. I couldn't sit across a table from them, pretending we were normal. Weeks turned into months. I stayed distant, isolated. My only solace was work, the one place where my mind couldn't wander back to the images of them together. But then, just when I thought I was finally getting a grip, Mark showed up at my door. I almost didn't answer. When I saw him through the peephole, my gut clenched. He looked different, scruffy, nervous, almost desperate. Against my better judgment, I opened the door, but I didn't let him inside. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. He swallowed hard. "Jake, please, just hear me out." I crossed my arms. "You've had months. What could you possibly say now?" His eyes darted away. "Things aren't what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because what I think is that you stole my wife and paraded her around like a trophy. Enlighten me if I'm wrong." He winced. "It's not like that anymore. Lisa, she's not who you think she is." I stiffened. "Don't you dare try to blame her. You made her choices." But then his voice cracked. "She's using me, Jake. I thought she loved me, but she doesn't. She's been seeing other guys, even while with me." I narrowed my eyes. "And why exactly should I care?" "Because you were right," he said, his voice breaking. "I ruined everything for her, and she doesn't care. She doesn't love me. She never loved you either. She just takes and takes until there's nothing left. And now she's moving on again." I stood there, stunned, anger warring with a flicker of pity. Mark looked hollow, like the same woman who destroyed me was now chewing him up too. But the thing is, part of me still didn't trust him. Was this just another manipulation? Another excuse to crawl back into my life? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked flatly. He hesitated. "Because I don't have anyone else, and I don't know what to do." For a moment, I almost felt the old brotherly instinct stir. The urge to protect him, to help him. But then the memory of him in my bed with Lisa slammed into me, and the instinct died. "You made your bed," I said, my voice low. "Now lie in it." I closed the door in his face. But that night, lying awake, his words echoed in my head. Was Lisa already moving on from him? Had she used him the same way she used me? And if so, why did it matter to me? The truth is, it did matter. Not because I cared about Mark anymore, but because it confirmed something I had been afraid to admit. It wasn't just betrayal. It was Lisa's nature. She thrived on destruction. And if I didn't fully close the door, she'd keep finding ways back into my life. And she did. A week later, I came home to find Lisa waiting outside my apartment. "Jake," she said softly, her eyes red from crying. "Please, can we talk?" I clenched my jaw. "We've talked enough." She shook her head. "No, you don't understand. Mark, he's gone. I ended it. He wasn't enough for me." I almost laughed in her face. "Not enough for you? After everything you destroyed to be with him?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake. You're the one I should have fought for. You're the one I really love." Her words made me sick. I could see the manipulation dripping from every syllable. She didn't love me. She loved control. And when she lost control of Mark, she came crawling back to the one person she thought she could still sway me. But I wasn't that man anymore. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to wreck my life and then come back like nothing happened. I'm done being your safety net." For a split second, her expression shifted, No more tears. No more sadness. Just cold fury. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice venomous. "You'll regret throwing me away." She stormed off, and I knew in that moment that I'd never see her the same way again. Not as a wife. Not even as a person I once loved. Just as someone who thrived on ruining everything she touched. And as for Mark, I haven't spoken to him since. Maybe he finally learned the price of betrayal. Maybe not. But either way, he's no longer my brother in my eyes. I lost my wife and my brother in one blow, but what I gained was clarity. Sometimes, family isn't who you're born with. It's who stands beside you when everything falls apart. And neither of them stood by me. So I built something new. My own peace. My own life. Free from their poison. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. Subscribe if you want more stories that pull you in and keep you hooked until the very end. You won't want to miss what comes next. You ever look back on a single moment and realize it flipped your whole life upside down? For me, it wasn't a dramatic fight or some tragic accident. It was just one night, one stupid decision to open a message that I probably should have ignored. It was late. I've been working long hours at the warehouse, bone tired, but I couldn't sleep. I was scrolling through my phone when a notification popped up from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Emily Carter. Now, to most people, that name wouldn't mean anything. But to me, Emily was the girl. The one from high school who everyone thought I'd end up with. We dated for 2 years, right through junior and senior year, and broke up right before college. The kind of breakup that wasn't messy but still left a permanent scar. We went our separate ways, never talked again. And now, years later, there she was. Her message was short. "Hey Jake, I don't know if you even want to hear from me, but can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it. Why open old wounds? But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I typed back, "Yeah, what's going on?" That's how it started. We ended up texting back and forth until nearly 3 in the morning. She told me about her life, how she'd moved back to town after her marriage fell apart. She had a 6-year-old daughter. She was working as a nurse. And she admitted she thought about me more than she probably should have. I told her about my life too. How I'd never married, just floated from one relationship to the next, never really finding anything that stuck. How I was still close with my folks, still trying to figure things out even though I was pushing 30. The conversation felt natural. Too natural. Like no time had passed at all. And that's where the problem started. Because over the next few weeks, we talked more and more. Texts during the day, calls at night. She even sent pictures of her daughter. "Just so you know what my world looks like," she said. I should have known better. Emily wasn't just some old friend reconnecting. She was a storm blowing back into my life, stirring up feelings I thought I'd buried years ago. The first time we saw each other again, it was at a diner. She walked in wearing this simple sundress, hair pulled back, no makeup, and she still looked like the same Emily I used to know. Older, sure, a little more tired around the eyes, but still her. When she saw me, she smiled like we'd never lost touch. "Jake," she said, hugging me like we were kids again. "God, it's been too long." We sat in that booth for 3 hours, drinking coffee and catching up. She told me more about her ex-husband, how he'd left when their daughter was barely 2, how she'd spent years trying to make it work, how she finally realized she couldn't keep holding on to someone who didn't want to be there. And I listened, really listened, because that's who Emily always was to me, the girl who made me want to pay attention. But as much as I wanted to get lost in the nostalgia, I couldn't ignore the truth. She was vulnerable, freshly divorced, raising a child alone, probably lonely. And me? I was the safe choice, the familiar face. Still, I couldn't help it. The connection was too strong. That night when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I dug out an old shoebox from my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were pictures of us from high school, prom, football games, goofy selfies. Looking at them, I felt this ache in my chest, like maybe we'd been meant to find our way back all along. The next few weeks blurred together. We kept meeting up, sometimes with her daughter, sometimes just the two of us. One Saturday, she invited me over for dinner. I showed up with a bottle of wine, nervous as hell, but she made it easy. She cooked pasta, we laughed, and her daughter, Lily, sat between us at the table, shy but sweet. After Lily went to bed, Emily and I sat on the couch. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I swear, it was like being 17 again. That old rhythm, that old spark, it was all still there. She whispered, "I missed this." And before I knew it, I kissed her. It wasn't fireworks or some dramatic movie moment. It was soft, familiar, comforting, and terrifying, because I knew once I crossed that line, there was no going back. The thing is, it felt right. Too right. But that's when the guilt kicked in. See, here's the part one haven't told you yet. Emily wasn't just my high school girlfriend. She was also my best friend's sister. And that best friend? Mike Carter. Yeah, the same Mike I still grab beers with on Friday nights. The same Mike who once swore he'd kill any guy who hurt his sister. The same Mike who trusted me more than anyone. And here I was, sneaking around with her behind his back. At first, I tried to convince myself it wasn't serious. Just two old flames reconnecting. Nothing to worry about. But the more time I spent with her, the harder it got to pretend. One night, Mike called me like usual. "Hey man, you free to hang out tomorrow?" Thinking we hit the bar, watch the game. And my stomach dropped because I already had plans with Emily. I made up some excuse about being busy, but I could hear the suspicion in his voice. "You've been dodging me a lot lately." "Everything good. Yeah, just work, you know." I lied. That was the first of many lies. And only got worse from there. Because Emily didn't want to hide forever. She started dropping hints about telling Mike. "He deserves to know," she'd say. "We can't sneak around forever." But the thought of that conversation made me sick. I could picture it so clearly. Mike's face when he found out, the betrayal in his eyes. Losing not just my best friend, but my brother in all but blood. And yet, every time Emily smiled at me, every time Lily ran up and hugged me like I'd been part of their family forever, I wondered if maybe it was worth the risk. Maybe this was what I'd been waiting for all along. But deep down, I knew the storm was coming. And when it hit, it would hit hard. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that secrets have a way of rotting everything they touch. At first, it feels manageable, like you're in control, keeping the truth tucked away. But the longer you hold it, the heavier it gets. And eventually, it spills out whether you're ready or not. For me, that moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday night. I was sitting on Emily's couch, Lily asleep upstairs, and Emily curled up against me. We were watching some mindless show, but I couldn't focus. My phone kept buzzing on the coffee table. When I finally checked, it was Mike. 3 missed calls. I knew I couldn't ignore him forever, so I answered. His voice came through sharp, already suspicious. "Where the hell are you?" "I've been calling you all night." "Oh, just at home, man. Long week." There was a pause, and then he said, "Funny, because I just swung by your place, and your truck isn't there." My chest tightened. I looked at Emily, who sat up straighter, instantly sensing the tension. "Yeah, I went out for a drive. Needed to clear my head." But Mike wasn't buying it. "Cut the crap, Jake. What's going on? You've been acting weird for weeks." My mouth went dry. I wanted to tell him right then to just rip the Band-Aid off. But Emily grabbed my hand, shaking her head. "Not like this," she whispered. So I lied again. "Nothing's going on. I'm just tired, that's all." Mike was silent for a long time, then said, "You'd tell me if something was up, right? You're like my brother." That word, brother, hit me harder than anything. Because brothers don't do what I was doing. I muttered, hating myself. When the call ended, Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. "We can't keep this up. It's not fair to anyone." "I know," I whispered. The problem was, neither of us had the courage to make the first move. The truth finally came out a week later, and it wasn't on my terms. Mike showed up at Emily's house unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. Emily and I were in the kitchen making sandwiches, Lily drawing at the table, when there was a knock at the door. Emily froze, like she already knew. When I opened it, there was Mike standing there with a six-pack in his hand and a look on his face that made my stomach sink. "Jake," he said slowly, eyes flicking past me into the house. "What are you doing here?" I scrambled for an excuse, but Emily stepped forward. "Mike, we need to talk." His jaw tightened. "Talk about what?" Emily's voice shook. "About me and Jake." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mike's eyes darted between us, his brain connecting the dots, and when it clicked, his face went red. "You gotta be kidding me," he growled. He dropped the six-pack on the porch with a thud. My best friend? My own sister? Behind my back. Mike, I started, but he cut me off, his voice booming. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to justify this. You swore to me, Jake. You swore you'd never hurt her. And this is how you repay me. Emily stepped in, tears streaming down her face. Mike, it's not like that. We didn't plan this. It just happened. Please, don't be angry. Don't be angry, he shouted. I trusted you both. And you went behind my back like I'm some idiot. Lily peeked up from the table, wide-eyed, and Emily quickly scooped her up, rushing her upstairs. That left just me and Mike standing in the middle of the storm. Look, man, I said, my voice cracking. I know I screwed up. I should have told you sooner. But I care about her. I care about Lily. This isn't some fling. I wouldn't be here if it was. But Mike wasn't listening. He was shaking his head, pacing like he wanted to put his fist through the wall. You had 100 chances to come clean, he snapped. And you didn't. You lied to my face. Over and over. I tried to step closer, but he shoved me back. Stay the hell away from me, Jake. You're dead to me. Those words stung worse than any punch. Because in that moment, I knew I'd lost him. My best friend. My brother. Emily came back down, Lily clinging to her shoulder, and Mike just stared at us one last time before storming out, slamming the door behind him. The silence after he left was deafening. The weeks that followed were brutal. Mike cut me off completely. No calls, no texts, nothing. Our Friday nights were over. I wasn't welcome at his house, his parents' house, anywhere. And the guilt, it ate at me. Because as much as I loved Emily, I couldn't shake the feeling that I destroyed something irreplaceable. Emily tried to reassure me. He'll come around, she'd say. He just needs time. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Then one night, out of the blue, I got a text from Mike. Meet me at O'Malley's. We need to talk. I almost didn't go. Part of me thought it was a trap, that he was just going to tear into me again. But another part of me hoped maybe, just maybe, we could fix things. When I walked into the bar, Mike was already there, nursing a beer. He didn't look at me at first, just stared at the TV above the bar. Finally, he said, sit. I sat. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed, shaking his head. You know what hurts the most? He said quietly. It's not that you're with her. It's that you lied to me. You looked me in the eye, week after week, and you lied. That's not brotherhood, Jake. I know. I admitted my throat tight. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the second you lied, he said bluntly. We sat in silence again, and I realized this was it. There was no magic fix, no way to undo the damage. Finally, Mike looked at me, his eyes tired. If you're serious about her, then be serious. Take care of her. Take care of Lily. But don't expect me to be part of it. Not now. Maybe not ever. And with that, he stood and walked out, leaving me sitting there with a beer I couldn't even taste. That was 3 months ago. Since then, Emily and I have grown closer. I've become a steady part of Lily's life. We've built something real, something solid. But it came at a cost. I lost my best friend, my brother, and maybe one day he'll forgive me, but I can't count on that. All I can do now is keep moving forward. Build a life with Emily and her daughter. Try to prove to myself, to Mike, maybe even to him one day, that this wasn't just some selfish fling, that it was worth the pain. Because the truth is, I do love her, more than I ever thought I could. And maybe that's enough. If you made it this far, thank you. These stories take a lot out of me to write and share, and your support means everything. So please subscribe. It gives me the motivation to keep bringing you more raw, emotional stories like this one. When I was 25, I thought I had my whole life mapped out. I had a job I actually liked, a small but cozy apartment, and a relationship that I believed would last forever. My girlfriend, Emily, was everything I thought I wanted. She was kind, outgoing, and had this spark in her that could light up any room. At least, that's how I saw her then. We had been together for almost 4 years when this story really began to unfold. We'd gone through the ups and downs that most couples face, arguments about money, little jealousies, disagreements about the future, but I always thought our love was strong enough to survive all of it. I wasn't naive, but I believed in her and us. One thing you should know about me is that I wasn't just in love with Emily. I trusted her completely. I wasn't the type to check her phone, question where she was, or doubt her words. If she said she was working late, I believed her. If she said she was going out with friends, I didn't hesitate. That blind trust was something I carried with pride. But trust, as I would later learn, is also the very thing that can break you the hardest. It started subtly. The first time I noticed something was off was when Emily began pulling away from our usual routines. For years, every Friday night was our night. We'd either go out for dinner or cook together, then spend the evening watching movies, playing games, or just lying on the couch, talking about everything and nothing. But one Friday, she texted me an hour before I got off work. "Hey, I'm actually going to hang out with a couple coworkers tonight. Don't wait up, love you." I didn't think much of it. After all, she had every right to spend time with her friends. But then it happened again the following Friday. And then again. Soon, our Friday night tradition was gone, replaced with vague explanations about team outings and catching up with the girls. At first, I brushed it off. Relationships need space, right? She deserved to have her own life, her own circle. But still, I couldn't shake the disappointment I felt every time she chose someone else over me. The real turning point came one evening when she came home later than usual. I was on the couch, half asleep, when I heard the door unlock. The clock read 1:43 a.m. She tried to slip in quietly, but I heard the unmistakable sound of a giggle, and then the quick hush of a whispered goodbye before the door closed. I sat up, my heart racing. She froze when she saw me awake. "Oh, you scared me," she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Who were you with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Just Sarah from work. We had a late dinner and lost track of time." I wanted to believe her. God, I really did. But something about the way she avoided my gaze told me there was more to the story. Still, I let it go. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Weeks went by, and the distance between us grew wider. Emily became secretive with her phone, flipping it upside down when she set it on the table. She changed her passcode, claiming she needed better security. She started wearing perfume even when she was just running errands. The red flags were practically screaming at me. But love makes you blind, and trust makes you stupid. I convinced myself it was stress, that maybe she was just struggling with something she didn't want to talk about. Then came the night that shattered everything. I was leaving work late after a long day and decided to swing by a little cafe Emily loved. I thought I'd surprise her by bringing her favorite dessert home. But when I walked in, I froze. There she was, sitting at a corner table, leaning in close to a man I had never seen before. They weren't just talking, they were holding hands across the table. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her whole face lit up as she hung onto his every word. My chest tightened, and for a second I couldn't move. I stood there, watching as she laughed, as he brushed a strand of hair from her face like it was the most natural thing in the world. That should have been me. It was me for years. I turned around and walked out before she saw me. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the dessert box I had bought for her. On the drive home, my mind raced with every possibility. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was I losing her, or had I already lost her and just didn't know it? That night, she came home later again. I sat in the dark, waiting. "How was your night?" I asked when she walked through the door. "Fine, just hung out with Sarah again." "Why are you sitting here in the dark?" "You're being weird." I studied her face. She looked at me like I was paranoid, like I was imagining things. And maybe I was. At least that's what she wanted me to think. But I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to know the truth, not just a suspicion. Over the next few days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I started paying attention to details I used to ignore. The time she left, the places she claimed to go, the way her mood shifted when her phone buzzed. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't help it. I started checking small things, looking for inconsistencies. And sure enough, they were there. One night, she told me she was working late on a project with her boss. But I checked her location through a feature we had set up months ago for safety. She wasn't at the office. She was across town at some unfamiliar apartment complex. My stomach dropped. I didn't confront her that night, but something inside me broke. The hardest part was acting normal. She came home the next morning, wearing the same clothes she had left in, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't hers. She kissed me on the cheek, mumbled something about being exhausted, and went straight to bed. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched breakfast I had made for her. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I kept asking myself, why? Why would she do this to me? What had I done wrong? Wasn't I enough? But the truth was, it wasn't about me. It was about her. And deep down, I knew that. I told myself I needed proof, something undeniable. So, the following week, when she said she had another late work meeting, I followed her. My heart pounded the entire time, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I parked a block away and watched as she walked up to the same apartment building I'd seen on the location tracker. Moments later, the same man from the cafe opened the door and pulled her into his arms. They kissed, long, passionate, familiar. And that was it. That was the moment the trust we had built over 4 years completely shattered. I drove home in silence, my head a whirlwind of anger, grief, and disbelief. She came back hours later, slipping into bed beside me like nothing had happened. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. But instead, I stayed quiet because I realized something. If I confronted her too soon, she'd just lie. She'd twist the story, gaslight me, make me feel like the crazy one. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed her to tell me the truth herself, and I was going to make sure she did. The next morning, I woke up before Emily and just watched her sleep. Her face looked so peaceful, almost innocent, like she hadn't just come from another man's bed hours earlier. It was strange, sitting there, realizing I was sharing my life, my home, my bed with someone I didn't really know anymore. I couldn't live in that limbo forever. I needed answers, but I also needed her to admit it, not just me throwing accusations. So I started planning. Over the next week, I played the part of the oblivious boyfriend. I laughed at her jokes, cooked dinner, and asked about her day like nothing was wrong. All the while, I was paying attention. Every excuse, every late-night text, every work meeting that didn't add up. One evening, I casually mentioned that my boss wanted me to stay late at work on Friday. "That's fine," Emily said, almost too quickly. "I'll probably just do a girls' night with Sarah anyway." My chest tightened. There was again, Sarah, the ghost friend she used as a shield. I smiled and said, "Sounds fun," but inside I was boiling. Friday came, and I didn't go to work late. Instead, I drove straight to that apartment building I'd seen before and waited. Sure enough, Emily showed up wearing her favorite dress, the one she usually saved for our anniversaries. She walked inside like she belonged there. That was the night I decided I couldn't keep pretending. When she came home past midnight, I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting. The lights were dim, and the silence in the room felt suffocating. "You're still up?" she asked, setting her purse down. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady, but my hands clenched under the table. "How was Sarah?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Good. We just had some drinks. Caught up, you know." I stared at her. "You really want to stick with that story?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I followed you tonight." "Emily," I said quietly. "You weren't with Sarah. You were at his place." The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For a moment, I almost pitied her, caught in her own web of lies. Finally, she whispered, "I can't explain." I laughed bitterly. "Explain? What could you possibly say that makes this okay?" "For years, Emily, for years I trusted you with everything I had. And this is what you do." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "Not anymore. I didn't mean for it to happen," she said. "At first, it was just friendship. You listened to me in a way you didn't anymore. That hit me like a punch. So it's my fault now." "No, that's not what I mean," she said quickly. I felt like we were drifting apart, and he was there. One thing led to another. I shook my head. "Don't you dare downplay this. You didn't trip and fall into his bed, Emily. You chose this, over and over again." For the next hour, we argued, if you could even call it that. She tried to justify it, tried to say she still loved me, that she didn't want to lose what we had. She begged me not to throw it all away, but I couldn't unsee what I had seen. I couldn't unknow the truth. Finally, I said, "Pack a bag. You can stay at his place tonight, since that's where you really want to be." She stared at me, shocked. "You're kicking me out? Just like that? You made your choice. I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. Now live with it. She left that night. I watched from a window as she walked down the street, her figure shrinking into the darkness until she was gone. The apartment felt unbearably empty after that, every corner echoing with memories of us. Our laughter, our fights, the quiet mornings with coffee and messy hair. I barely slept. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left me with nothing but pain. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. She called, texted, even showed up at my door, crying, saying she made a mistake. But I couldn't let her back in. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was betrayal. One night, about a month later, she left me a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, desperate. I don't know what I was thinking, she said. He doesn't mean anything. He was just an escape. But you're the one I want. Please, can we talk? I'll do anything to fix this. Just give me one more chance. I sat there listening to the message over and over. A part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that maybe we could rebuild what was broken. But another part of me, the part that remembered her lies, the nights she came home smelling like someone else, knew better. I deleted the voicemail. Healing wasn't easy. I had to relearn how to live without her, how to find myself outside of us. I leaned on my friends, threw myself into work, and started picking up hobbies I'd abandoned during our relationship. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to feel like me again. And here's the thing. I realized that losing her wasn't the worst thing that happened to me. The worst thing was staying blind to the truth for so long. Once I let go, once I faced reality, I finally started to heal. I don't know where Emily is now, or if she ever found what she was looking for. But I do know this. Trust, once broken, can never be the same again. And no matter how much you love someone, you can't force them to love you the way you deserve. If you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed like I was, let me tell you something. Walking away doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than you think. Don't waste your heart on someone who doesn't value it. And if you made it to the end of this story, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. There are more stories like this, raw, emotional, and real, that I'll be sharing with you. Trust me, you don't want to miss them. I used to think betrayal was something that happened to other people, stuff you read about online or hear in someone else's sad story. I never thought it would sneak into my own life, quietly, like a thief slipping through a window at night. It all started a few months ago when I noticed small changes in how my fiancée, Rachel, acted around me. At first, they were so subtle that I brushed them off. A late text here, a distracted glance there, her laughter at a notification that she didn't share with me. I told myself, she's just busy. She's planning the wedding. I'm overthinking. We'd been together 5 years, engaged for 1. We were supposed to get married in 8 months. The venue was booked, deposits paid, families buzzing with excitement. Rachel was my person, my partner, my best friend, the one I thought I would grow old with. So, naturally, I didn't want to see the cracks forming. But cracks have a way of widening, and once you notice them, it's impossible to unsee. It began with her phone. Rachel used to leave her phone lying around anywhere, in the kitchen, on the couch, even in the bathroom while she showered. She never cared if I picked it up to check the time or look something up. But lately, she kept it glued to her hand. Even when it was charging, she'd place its screen down like she didn't want me to glance at it accidentally. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me, something cute for the wedding. I wanted to believe that so badly. Then came a nights out. Rachel and her coworkers would go for drinks after work, which was normal enough. But suddenly, these nights stretched later and later. Sometimes she'd come home at midnight, cheeks flushed, smelling of perfume and alcohol. She'd laugh it off, saying, "You know how Lisa gets when she's had one too many. Someone has to make sure she gets home safe." But I never heard Lisa's voice in the background when Rachel called to check in. The turning point came on a Saturday. Rachel said she was going shopping with her mom to look at centerpieces for the wedding. I didn't think much of it until I ran into her mom at the grocery store that afternoon. "Rachel's not with you?" I asked casually. Her mom frowned. "No, I haven't seen her since last weekend." "Why?" It felt like the ground opened under my feet. I smiled weakly and said, "Oh, I must have mixed up the dates." The whole drive home, My stomach was in knots. Where'd she really gone? Why did she lie? That evening, when she walked through the door carrying a single shopping bag, she kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. I wanted to confront her right there, but I froze. I didn't want to believe what my gut was screaming. Over the next few weeks, I became more observant. I started noticing her makeup being touched up before errands, the new lingerie tucked in her drawer without tags, the way she'd suddenly silence her phone when we sat down to dinner. Still, I told myself, wait, don't jump to conclusions. You'll ruin everything if you're wrong. But the truth doesn't stay hidden forever. One night, Rachel said she had to work late. I decided to surprise her with her favorite takeout, thinking it might cheer her up. I drove to her office building, parked outside, and waited. Hours went by. The lights on her floor were off. The lot was mostly empty. And then I saw her. She wasn't alone. Rachel walked out of the building laughing, her arm brushing against a man's. They stopped by his car, and I watched as she leaned in, kissed him softly, and slipped into the passenger seat. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles went white. Every hope, every plan, every memory we'd built together cracked like glass. I didn't follow them. I couldn't. I just sat there, heart racing, eyes stinging, trying to process what I had just seen. When Rachel came home later that night, she acted like nothing had happened. She curled up beside me on the couch, asked how my day was, kissed me goodnight. I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The next morning, I looked at her across the breakfast table and felt something break inside me. I knew. I didn't need proof beyond what I'd seen, but part of me wanted her to admit it, to face me with the truth instead of weaving more lies. So I started planning, not just to catch her, but to figure out if I had the strength to walk away. The following weekend, Rachel told me she had another work trip, a quick overnight out of town. My chest tightened as I nodded and wished her safe travels. But instead of staying home, I followed her. She didn't go to the airport. She didn't go anywhere near her company's headquarters. She drove 2 towns over, parked in front of a little hotel, and walked in holding hands with the same man I'd seen before. That image is burned into my memory. The way she laughed, the way she looked at him like he was the center of her universe. That was supposed to be me. I didn't confront her right then. I left. I drove until my gas light came on, tears blurring my vision, my mind spinning with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Did she ever really love me? Was our entire relationship built on lies? That night, I didn't sleep. I kept going over every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I'd missed. Maybe the late nights, the sudden fights over nothing, the coldness in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Maybe they were always there, and I was too blind to see them. When she came home the next morning, she smelled like his cologne. I knew it instantly because it wasn't mine. She smiled, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "Missed you." It took everything in me not to scream. Instead, I nodded and whispered, "Me too," because I wasn't ready. Not yet. The truth is, betrayal doesn't just shatter your trust. It makes you doubt yourself. Was I overreacting? Could I be wrong? Did I deserve this somehow? But deep down, I knew the truth. And I knew that the person I loved, the person I was supposed to marry, was slowly destroying me from the inside out. So I started keeping notes, dates, times, places. I saved screenshots of vague messages, receipts she left lying around, anything that might give me clarity later. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. Every day, I looked at her, and every day it felt like I was slipping further away from myself. I needed to make a decision, confront her, or keep pretending. The decision to finally confront Rachel weighed on me like a stone in my chest. Every morning I woke up and looked at her sleeping next to me, and every morning I asked myself, how much longer can I live like this? I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping. I caught myself zoning out at work, my coworkers asking if I was okay. I wasn't. I was falling apart. And the only person who could fix it was the same person who was breaking me. I knew I couldn't keep collecting evidence forever. This wasn't a courtroom. This was my life, and I had to decide what I was willing to tolerate. That Friday night, Rachel told me she had another late meeting. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and told her to be safe. The second she left, I grabbed my jacket and followed her. She drove straight to that same little hotel 2 towns over. And just like before, she walked in with him, laughing, smiling, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I sat there in the car, watching, shaking, my heart thundering in my chest. And that was the moment I knew I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep being the fool in my own story. So I went home and I waited. When she came in the next morning, I was already at the kitchen table. Coffee cup in front of me, notes scattered across the surface. My phone with screenshots of her messages pulled up. She looked surprised to see me awake. "Morning, babe. You're up early." I didn't smile. "Sit down, Rachel." Something in my tone must have startled her, because she hesitated before sliding into the chair across from me. "What's going on?" she asked carefully. I slid the phone across the table. On the screen was a photo I'd taken of her walking into the hotel with him. Her face drained of color. She stared at the screen, then back at me, mouth opening and closing like she didn't know where to start. "Say something," I said, my voice trembling. Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this." I laughed bitterly. "Like this? Rachel, you're engaged to me. We're supposed to be planning our wedding, and you've been sneaking around with him. How exactly did you want me to find out?" She wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. At first, it was just—" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't insult me by saying it was just a mistake. You don't end up in a hotel room with someone by accident. You chose this over and over again." Her hands trembled on the table. "I still love you." I felt my chest cave in. "No, you don't. Because if you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, she whispered, "I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I got scared. Maybe I felt trapped. I don't know. But I swear, he doesn't mean anything compared to you." I shook my head slowly. "You don't betray someone you love because you're scared. You talk to them. You fight for them. You don't crawl into someone else's bed." Her tears turned into sobs. She reached across the table, but I pulled back. Her touch felt foreign now, like a stranger's. "I can change," she said desperately. "Please, let me prove it to you. Don't throw us away." I stared at her, at the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, and realized she was already gone. The following days were a blur. She begged me not to tell our families, not to cancel the wedding yet, not to give up on her. But I couldn't picture myself standing at that altar, looking her in the eye, and promising forever. I called off the wedding. Her parents were devastated. Mine were furious on my behalf, and Rachel. Rachel moved out, but not without a fight. She left notes, sent long texts, even showed up at my door crying. But every time I looked at her, all I could see was that hotel entrance. All I could hear was the silence when she could have told me the truth, but chose to lie instead. And I knew I couldn't build a life on that. Months passed. The pain dulled, but it never fully went away. Some nights, I still woke up and reached for her, only to find an empty bed. Some days I caught myself wondering what she was doing, who she was with, whether she regretted it at all. But I also started to heal. I went to therapy, leaned on my friends, and reminded myself that her choices weren't a reflection of my worth. Slowly, I began to believe it. One night, Rachel sent me one last message. "I'll regret this for the rest of my life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away. I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Betrayal changes you. It hardens you in ways you never asked for, but it also teaches you what you deserve. And I've learned I deserve honesty, loyalty, and someone who will fight for me instead of against me. So if you've ever been in my shoes, listen to me. Don't settle for someone who makes you doubt yourself. Don't cling to the idea of what could be when the reality is breaking you. Walking away hurts, but staying will destroy you. And if you've made it this far into my story, I just want to say thank you. Sharing these moments isn't easy, but knowing people out there listen and understand makes it worth it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It gives me the motivation to keep bringing you more real, raw stories just like this one. I never thought something as simple as a birthday party could unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. But that night, when everything started falling apart, I realized how fragile trust really is. I'm Alex, 27, male, and I thought I had the perfect relationship. My girlfriend, Emily, 26, was smart, funny, and supportive in ways I didn't even know I needed. We'd been together for about a year and a half, and I convinced myself that we were untouchable. We lived together in a small apartment downtown, shared weekend rituals, and even had those silly inside jokes that made strangers cringe. Everything looked perfect from the outside, and I liked it that way. It was a Thursday evening when Emily said she was going out with friends. No big deal. I had some work to finish up and a few errands to run. She kissed me goodbye and left, smiling like she always did. I assumed she was meeting a few friends for dinner, maybe some drinks. Normal stuff. Later that night, while scrolling through social media to unwind, I stumbled across a picture that made my stomach drop. Emily was in the frame, laughing with a guy I recognized immediately. I froze for a second before even realizing the caption. "Happy birthday, Nick. Good times all around." Nick. That name echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Nick was Emily's ex from college. They'd dated for almost 4 years, and from what I've been told, it ended amicably. She claimed they were just friends, that nothing serious remained, and honestly, I had no reason to doubt her, until now. I stared at the photo, the laughter frozen in time, and a knot formed in my chest. Why hadn't she mentioned this? Why would she go to his birthday without telling me? My first instinct was anger, my second was disbelief, and my third was this creeping sense of betrayal. When she came home later, I tried to act casual. "Hey," I said, making myself sound nonchalant, even though my hands were shaking. "Hey," she chirped, dropping her bag and flopping onto the couch. "So, you went to Nick's birthday tonight?" My voice was steadier than I felt, but I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. Emily blinked. Yeah, it was just a small thing with some old friends. Didn't think you'd care." "Just a small thing?" I echoed. "You didn't think I'd care? Or you didn't think I should know?" Her face shifted. I could see the tension, the defensiveness. "Alex, it's not a big deal. Seriously, we're not. I don't know. Nothing happened. It was just friends." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "I get that. I'm not accusing you of anything. I wish you had mentioned it. It feels weird to find out like this." She shrugged, clearly frustrated. "You're overreacting. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't think it mattered." I spent the rest of the evening uneasy, walking around the apartment in circles, replaying the image of her laughing with him. That laughter didn't belong to me anymore, at least in that moment. Something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling. Every text, every call, every little interaction seemed loaded. I'd ask innocent questions about her day, and I could hear her hesitating before answering. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, telling myself I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. A week later, I noticed something odd. Emily's phone would light up at strange times, and she'd quickly silence it. Not a big deal, except she always left her notifications visible when we were together. But now, she was careful guarded. I wanted to confront her, but a part of me was terrified of what I might discover. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved could be capable of deceit, yet every fiber of my gut was screaming at me. Then came the night that confirmed my worst fears. I was finishing up some work on my laptop when I saw her phone light up again. This time, curiosity overpowered my caution. I glanced at the screen and froze. Messages from Nick. Not casual happy birthday messages, but intimate, lingering texts that made my skin crawl. She was planning to meet him again. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her, but I did none of that. I closed my laptop and sat there, paralyzed, as the reality sank in. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but my silence spoke volumes. Emily noticed immediately. "Alex, you've been quiet all morning." "I just had a lot on my mind," I said, forcing myself to sound calm. "You can tell me anything. You know that," she replied softly, but there was hesitation in her eyes, and I caught it. That hesitation broke something inside me. Over the following days, I tried to gather more evidence. I wanted to be sure before I confronted her. I wasn't a confrontational person by nature, but this felt like survival. Every time I went through her messages, every little detail I noticed, the knot in my stomach grew tighter. And then came the weekend, the moment that would finally tip everything into motion. Emily said she had a work event, a networking dinner. She left the apartment dressed sharply, kissed me goodbye, and promised she'd be back late. But I couldn't shake the suspicion that she wasn't telling the full truth. I followed her discreetly, keeping my distance as she drove out of the city and into the suburbs. She pulled into a quiet, nondescript building and went inside. I parked a few blocks away and watched. A few minutes later, Nick pulled up and they went inside together. I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. How could someone I trusted so completely betray me like this? The tears came without warning, streaming down my face as I realized I couldn't ignore this anymore. That night, when she came home, I had already made my decision. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand, screenshots of the messages and the hotel photos ready. She walked in, humming a tune, completely unaware that the life I thought I had was shattered. "Alex," she asked, noticing my serious expression. "We need to talk," I said quietly. My voice was steady, but I could feel the rage building beneath the surface. She stopped in her tracks. "Talk about what?" I slid the phone across the table. "This. All of it." Her face went pale as she saw the messages, the photos, the proof of her betrayal. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I realized then that the woman who had smiled at me for months was gone. All that remained was someone who had made choices I couldn't forgive. The confrontation didn't last long. I laid everything out calmly, methodically, refusing to be manipulated or gaslighted. Every excuse, every tear, every plea was met with a single response: "I can't trust you anymore." By the end of the night, it was over. She packed her things and left. The apartment, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt hollow and cold. I sat there for hours, staring at the empty space where she used to be. My heart ached, but there was also relief. Relief that the lies were out in the open. Relief that I wouldn't have to pretend everything was fine anymore. Breaking up didn't magically heal me. I spent weeks mired in grief, questioning my judgment, wondering how someone I trusted so completely could betray me so thoroughly. But slowly I began to rebuild. I leaned on friends, sought therapy, and rediscovered parts of myself I neglected. And though the pain lingered, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen honesty, integrity, and self-respect over deception and betrayal. If you've ever been in a situation like this, remember, walking away is hard, but sometimes it's the only way to save yourself. Thank you for reading this part of my story. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. It motivates me to keep bringing real, raw, and compelling stories like this to you. Your support keeps these voices alive, and I promise there's more to come. The weeks after Emily left were some of the hardest of my life. The apartment, once filled with laughter and warmth, felt like a ghost of what it had been. Every corner reminded me of her. The mug she always left on the counter, the throw blanket she claimed was hers, even the scent lingering faintly on the couch. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself that time would heal, but grief doesn't follow a schedule. I immersed myself in work. I was lucky enough to have a job that demanded long hours, and throwing myself into tasks kept my mind occupied. Yet, every quiet moment brought back memories, her laugh, the way she tapped her fingers when she was thinking, the jokes that used to make me snort laugh in public. The betrayal lingered like a shadow, dark and heavy. One evening, about a month after she left, I received a message from someone I hadn't expected. "Nick." My stomach sank before I even opened it. "Hey Alex, just wanted to reach out. Emily hasn't been completely honest with either of us. I'm not trying to cause drama, just thought you should know what's been going on." I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend I hadn't seen it, but another part, curiosity, a need for closure, demanded I read on. The message detailed things I didn't know about Emily's life outside our relationship. There were mentions of lies, manipulation, and how she had kept certain relationships secret. Nick wasn't just a passive ex. He had been looped into her games in ways I hadn't imagined. The sense of betrayal I'd felt before only intensified. I realized then that my trust had been shattered in more ways than one. Emily wasn't just unfaithful in the romantic sense. She had been deceptive about her entire life, creating a version of herself that didn't exist. And yet, I had loved her fully, without question. That realization was humbling and painful all at once. I started seeing a therapist. I didn't want to stay trapped in my own thoughts, replaying every memory and questioning my judgment. Therapy wasn't easy at first. Talking about betrayal, feeling the raw anger and sadness, facing the parts of myself that had ignored red flags. It was exhausting. But slowly, I began to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about reclaiming control over my own life. Around that time, I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship. Dinner nights, impromptu trips, even just sitting around playing video games. All of it reminded me that life went on, that I could still experience joy and laughter even after heartbreak. And it wasn't about replacing Emily. It was about rediscovering myself. One weekend, my best friend Jake suggested a hiking trip. I hesitated at first. I hadn't been outside the city much since the breakup, but eventually I agreed. There's something about being out in nature that's both humbling and liberating. The wind, the trails, the way the sun breaks through the trees. It reminded me that the world was bigger than my pain, bigger than betrayal, bigger than loss. Months went by. I started dating again, cautiously at first. Every text, every date, every laugh shared with someone new was a small victory over the fear that I'd never trust again. And slowly, the anger that had been a constant companion softened into understanding. I hadn't done anything wrong. Emily's choices were hers alone, and they reflected on her, not me. I even started volunteering at a local shelter on weekends. Helping others, seeing people in tough spots find hope, gave me perspective. It reminded me that life is complex, messy, and often unfair. But there's also a lot of beauty, a lot of resilience. By the time a year had passed, I felt stronger. Not unbroken, not naive, but stronger. I had learned to set boundaries, to trust my instincts, and to recognize my own worth. And while the memory of Emily and her betrayal would never completely disappear, it no longer defined me. I still think about that night, the messages, the photos, the moment I realized I couldn't stay. But I've come to understand that some endings, no matter how painful, are necessary. They make room for growth, for new experiences, and for connections that are genuine and reciprocal. A couple months ago, I met someone new, Rachel. She's kind, patient, and honest in ways I didn't know I needed. There's laughter in her presence, warmth in her touch, and a sense of safety I hadn't felt in a long time. I won't say that my past doesn't inform my present, but it doesn't dictate it either. Life has a way of teaching hard lessons. Betrayal, heartbreak, and the raw sting of lost trust are brutal teachers. But they also force you to see yourself clearly, to set your standards, and to demand respect in all areas of life. I'm grateful for the journey, painful as it was, because it brought me to a place where I could finally breathe freely again. If you followed this story all the way through, thank you. Your support truly motivates me to keep sharing these real, raw, and compelling stories. Hit that subscribe button. It encourages me to bring more stories that keep you engaged, entertained, and maybe even help you navigate some of life's messy moments. Every subscriber means I can continue uncovering tales that are relatable, gripping, and unforgettable. It started with a text that seemed harmless enough. Hey, can we talk later tonight? I stared at my phone for longer than I should have, a pit forming in my stomach. Sarah and I had been dating for just over a year. Things were good, maybe too good, I thought. But there had been this tiny, nagging feeling lately, the kind you can't quite put your finger on. Maybe it was her texting less in the mornings, or canceling plans at the last minute. Maybe it was nothing at all. I wanted to believe it was nothing. That night, she came over looking unusually serious. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her usual bright smile was gone. I poured us each a glass of wine, hoping the relaxed setting would make things easier. So, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, but I'm sure my voice betrayed me. Sarah took a deep breath and sank onto the couch. She didn't answer right away, and that silence felt heavier than anything I'd felt before. I've been keeping something from you, she finally admitted. The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I froze, wine halfway to my mouth. What do you mean? I asked, my voice tight, trying to mask the sudden adrenaline spike in my chest. She looked down, fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I didn't want to hurt you, but I think you deserve to know. I've been involved with someone else. I couldn't speak. My mind went blank. The room felt like it had tilted on its axis, the wine glass suddenly heavy in my hand. My heart pounded in a way that made me question whether it would ever slow down. When I finally croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. A few months ago, she said, her voice trembling. It started when I don't even know. It was stupid, and I hated myself for it. But it happened, and I've ended it now. I wanted to tell you before it got worse. I stared at her, trying to process. I wanted to feel anger, betrayal, shock, every possible emotion, but it all collided into one thick knot in my chest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice cracking slightly. I was scared, she admitted. I was scared you'd leave me. I thought maybe I could fix it before you ever found out. But I was wrong. I didn't know what to say. The love I felt for her fought with the anger, with the humiliation, with the doubt. Could I forgive her? Could I even look at her the same way? We spent the night talking. She explained everything. How it started as a flirtation. How she convinced herself it wasn't serious. How guilt had eaten at her daily. I listened, not interrupting, trying to map the timeline in my head. It hurt, sure, but what hurt more was seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. She was genuinely remorseful. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, not sure if what we had could survive. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the tears, the regret, and I wondered if I could ever trust her again. The next morning, I woke up to an empty apartment. Sarah had left early for work, leaving a note. I know things are complicated, but I want to try to make this right. I'm so sorry for everything. Please think about it. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to call her immediately, to hear her voice, to reassure myself that she was still committed. But another part of me screamed to run, to protect myself from more pain. I spent the day pacing my apartment, replaying her confession over and over in my mind. By evening, I decided I needed a distraction. I went for a run through the neighborhood, headphones in, music loud enough to drown my thoughts. But no matter how many blocks I ran, the image of her face haunted me. Every laugh we had shared, every argument we had resolved, every quiet moment on the couch seemed tainted now. Days turned into weeks. We tried to carry on as if nothing had happened, but there was an invisible crack running through our relationship. The trust wasn't gone. It was shattered into tiny pieces, and neither of us knew if it could ever be pieced back together. I began noticing little things that I had ignored before. Her phone vibrating more than usual, her distracted glances, the sighs she let out when she thought I wasn't watching. Every interaction became a test, a subtle question of loyalty and honesty. I wanted to believe her desperately, but fear has a way of sneaking into the smallest moments, and mine had made a home in my chest. One evening, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed clarity, even if it hurt. I asked her to sit down and talk. I need honesty, Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. No omissions, no sugarcoating. Just the truth, all of it. She nodded, eyes wide. I'll tell you everything. I swear. For the next hour, she walked me through her mistakes, her regrets, the moments where she had faltered. Every detail was like reopening a wound, raw and bleeding. And yet, listening, I began to see the complexity of human error, the mistakes that even good people can make when fear and desire collide. By the end, we were both silent, exhausted, raw, but there was a flicker of something else, an understanding that life is messy, that love is complicated, and that maybe, just maybe, redemption is possible if both people are willing to try. Over the next month, we rebuilt slowly. I set boundaries for myself, and she set boundaries for her behavior. Transparency became our lifeline. Every text, every meeting, every plan was discussed openly. It wasn't easy. Some days, the past crept in, and the fear of betrayal hovered at the edges. But with every honest conversation, the shadows receded a little. I learned to communicate in ways I hadn't before. I learned that love isn't just about feelings. It's about trust, consistency, and the courage to face mistakes head on. Sarah proved her commitment through actions, not just words. I proved my resilience by deciding to continue, despite the fear that lingered. And slowly, the laughter returned. The apartment, once haunted by doubt, began to feel like home again. We started planning trips, movie nights, and even small adventures just for the thrill of being together. Each step was deliberate, a conscious choice to prioritize honesty and care over fear and doubt. Life has a funny way of teaching lessons when you least expect it. Betrayal doesn't have to define you. Mistakes don't have to end everything. And love, real love, doesn't disappear just because it's tested. It evolves, grows, and sometimes it even heals the deepest wounds if both people are willing to fight for it. We're not perfect, and we never will be, but we are trying. And right now, that is enough. The weeks following our heart-to-heart felt surreal. It was as if we were learning each other all over again, discovering cracks we hadn't noticed before and finding ways to fill them with care. Every conversation now carried weight, every gesture a silent promise. But life has a way of testing even the strongest intentions. One Friday evening, Sarah and I were at the grocery store picking up essentials for the weekend. It was a simple task, something we had done countless times, but that night, a sense of unease gnawed at me. I couldn't tell if it was the lingering remnants of doubt or something else entirely. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing my furrowed brow as I scanned the produce. "Yeah, just thinking," I replied, forcing a small smile. But thinking turned into overthinking, as it often did. I remembered the past few months, her confession, the rebuilding, the cautious trust we had nurtured. Every step forward had been deliberate, but the fear of falling backward was always there. I reminded myself that healing takes time, that trust is fragile but not irreparable. At home, we cooked dinner together. The smell of garlic and onions sizzling in the pan filled the apartment, mingling with laughter as we tried and failed to perfectly flip the pancakes Sarah insisted on making for dessert. The normalcy of it all felt comforting, almost therapeutic. It reminded me that love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, the mundane routines that stitch lives together. Later that night, while we were winding down on the couch, Sarah reached for my hand. "I know it's hard," she said softly, "but I want you to know that I'm all in. I don't want to lose us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sincerity in her eyes. The vulnerability that had scared me so much months ago was now a bridge, connecting us in ways words never could. "I want that too," I whispered, feeling a cautious optimism creep into my chest. The following month, we faced challenges that tested our newfound foundation. I started noticing minor inconsistencies in her stories, small things that didn't quite add up. It was easy to panic, easy to assume the worst. But instead of letting suspicion fester, I decided to confront it calmly. "Hey, can you clarify something for me?" I asked one evening as we sat on the balcony with mugs of tea. She paused, sensing the gravity in my tone. "Of course. What's up?" I explained what I had noticed, the tiny discrepancies that made me uneasy. She listened without interruption, then took a deep breath. "I can see how that looked, and I'm sorry. It wasn't intentional. I must have forgotten to mention the detail, but nothing more." Her honesty, even when admitting small lapses, reminded me why I was trying to rebuild trust. It wasn't about perfection. It was about accountability, about choosing to be transparent even when it was uncomfortable. One evening, a few weeks later, we went out for a walk through the city park. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fallen leaves. Couples strolled past us, laughing, holding hands. For a moment, it felt like life had returned to a simpler rhythm, like we were just another couple enjoying the evening. "Remember when we used to walk here all the time?" Sarah asked, her eyes reflecting the golden streetlights. "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "Feels like forever ago." "It does," she replied. "But I like that we're making new memories now, too. Ones we can both be proud of." I nodded, realizing how true that was. The past, with all its mistakes and regrets, had shaped us, but it didn't have to define the future. We were writing a new story, and this one had a chance to be better, stronger. As the days turned into months, our relationship continued to evolve. The initial tension, the constant vigilance began to fade, replaced by a deeper connection forged in honesty and effort. We started planning a small weekend trip, a getaway, just to enjoy each other's company without the weight of our past mistakes looming over us. "I can't wait," Sarah said, excitement lighting up her face. "It'll be nice to just be us without everything else pressing in." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had been scarce during those early weeks after her confession. "Me too. We've earned this." But life, as it always does, reminded us that nothing worth having comes easy. Work pressures, family obligations, and the lingering shadows of doubt occasionally crept in. One evening, I came home to find Sarah unusually quiet, staring out the window. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting beside her. "It's nothing," she replied, but I knew better. There was a tension in her shoulders, a tightness in her voice. "Come on, talk to me," I pressed gently. She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. Sometimes I worry that you'll find it too hard to forgive me completely. I hate that I caused you pain." I took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "It's hard, yes, but forgiveness isn't about forgetting or ignoring what happened. It's about choosing to move forward together. And I'm choosing that every day." Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned into me. That moment, quiet and profound, reinforced everything I had learned about love. That it requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond mistakes to the person still standing there, asking for another chance. Weeks later, our trip arrived. We drove to a small cabin near a lake, surrounded by autumn trees ablaze with color. The first night, we sat by a fire pit, sipping hot cocoa, sharing stories, and laughing over minor mishaps from the drive. For the first time in months, I felt completely at ease. "I almost can't believe we made it here," I said, glancing at her. "After everything, it feels good to just be us." "I know," she replied, smiling softly. "We've been through a lot, but look at us now. Stronger, I think." The cabin stay became a turning point. We returned home with a renewed sense of purpose, a tangible reminder that even when love is tested, it can endure if nurtured properly. Months passed, and the healing continued. We celebrated anniversaries, supported each other through personal challenges, and learned to communicate without fear. There were moments of tension, yes, but they no longer felt insurmountable. The past existed, but it no longer controlled our present. One evening, as we were cooking dinner, Sarah looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Do you remember that first fight we had after everything?" I laughed, shaking my head. How could I forget? It felt like the end of the world. "And now look at us," she said, leaning in for a kiss. "We're still here, still trying, still choosing each other." I smiled, holding her hand. "Yeah, we are, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." Our journey wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But through betrayal, doubt, and fear, we had found a way to grow stronger together. We had learned that love isn't about being flawless. It's about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to face life's challenges together. And as I look back on everything we endured, I realize that every painful moment, every sleepless night, every tear shed was worth it. Because it led us to a place where trust could be rebuilt, where laughter could return, and where love could thrive despite its scars. If you've enjoyed this story and want more real, gripping, emotional tales that keep you hooked till the end, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates me to keep bringing you new stories like this every day. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. It all started with a message that seemed innocent at first. I was scrolling through my phone on a Saturday morning, sipping my coffee, when I saw a text from Emily. She was an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, and honestly, I wasn't sure why she was reaching out now. Hey, long time no talk. Want to catch up this weekend? It was casual enough, but something about it set off a little alarm in my mind. Still, I shrugged it off. I was feeling nostalgic, maybe even a little lonely, and catching up with someone from the past didn't seem like a bad idea. We decided to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, a place I had gone to countless times, but rarely with anyone I knew from high school. When I arrived, Emily was already there, sipping on a latte and scrolling on her phone. She looked almost the same, older, maybe, but still that same energy I remembered from high school. Confident, funny, and a little unpredictable. "Hey, stranger," she called out as I approached. "Hey," I replied, smiling nervously. We talked about the usual stuff at first. School memories, old mutual friends, where life had taken us. She had moved across states, worked a few odd jobs, and somehow ended up running a small art studio downtown. I, on the other hand, had stuck around the city, working long hours at a tech company, trying to figure out life while feeling like I was constantly behind. As the conversation shifted, she leaned in a little, lowering her voice. I never really got why we drifted apart. I laughed awkwardly. Life, I guess. People change, paths diverge. You know how it goes. She nodded, but didn't push it further. There was a moment of silence, just us staring out the window at the rain beginning to fall outside. It was calming, almost cinematic, the kind of moment you wish could freeze in time. "Do you ever feel like life is holding something back from you?" she asked suddenly, her eyes locking onto mine. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Like, there are things you don't see coming. People you trust, situations that seem harmless, but they're not. Life has a funny way of catching you off guard." I nodded slowly, intrigued but slightly uneasy. She had always had this knack for saying things that made you pause, for highlighting truths you hadn't realized yourself. Over the next few weeks, we kept in touch. She invited me to her studio, showing off her paintings and handmade sculptures. I found myself spending more time with her than I anticipated. There was a certain thrill in our interactions, an intensity one hadn't experienced in years. One Friday evening, she suggested we grab dinner at a new bistro that had opened near the waterfront. I agreed, figuring it would be another casual night out. But that night, something changed. Dinner started normally enough. The food was good, the conversation flowed, and I felt the kind of connection I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. But halfway through, Emily's demeanor shifted. Her laughter became sharper, her compliments edged with an intensity that made my stomach knot. She said, swirling her wine glass, "I always liked how predictable you are. You play it safe, follow the rules. So boring sometimes. But I like that about you. Makes it easy to guide you." I blinked, not sure how to respond. "Guide me?" I repeated. She smiled, leaning closer. "Let's just say, I like knowing I have a little influence over your choices. It's fun." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off as a joke. But inside, something was shifting. A tiny seed of unease had been planted. I didn't know it yet, but that night would mark the beginning of a roller coaster I couldn't have anticipated. The next few weeks were a blur of mixed emotions. Emily's behavior oscillated between affectionate and unervingly controlling. She would surprise me with small gifts, thoughtful gestures, and yet there were moments when her words cut deeper than I expected. One evening, after a long day at work, she invited me over to her apartment for dinner. I arrived to the smell of something sweet and savory, a home-cooked meal that smelled almost too perfect. She had spent hours preparing it, she said, wanting to make a night special. We sat down, ate, and laughed. But after dinner, she insisted I try a new dessert she had made, a small, rich chocolate cake that looked decadent. I took a bite, and it was delicious, almost heavenly. "You really know your way around the kitchen," I said, genuinely impressed. "I like knowing that you enjoy what I make," she said, her eyes glinting in the soft candlelight. "It makes me feel powerful in a way." I laughed again, but the unease returned. There was something about the way she said it that didn't sit right. I pushed the feeling aside, telling myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But later that night, I noticed a slight metallic taste in my mouth, faint but persistent. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just from the chocolate. By morning, however, my stomach felt off, queasy in a way that didn't pass quickly. Over the next few days, small symptoms appeared: headaches, fatigue, slight dizziness. I attributed it to stress and overwork, but the pattern became harder to ignore. Every time I spent an evening at her place, I felt worse the following day. It took me a week to start putting the pieces together. I remembered the subtle metallic taste, the growing malaise, and the fact that it only happened after eating her food. My heart raced as I considered the possibility that something was wrong, more than wrong, dangerous. I decided to confront her indirectly at first. I mentioned casually that I had felt unwell after certain meals, gauging her reaction. She laughed it off, brushing it aside as coincidence. But there was a flicker in her eyes, a slight tension that I couldn't ignore. One evening, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I went to her apartment, bringing with me a friend from work who had a background in chemistry. I needed confirmation before taking any drastic steps. As we sat, casually sipping tea she had prepared, my friend subtly tested small samples from the food and drinks she had offered over the past week. The results were alarming. Traces of a mild toxin were present. Not enough to be lethal immediately, but certainly enough to make someone ill over repeated exposure. My stomach dropped. The casual dinners, the smiles, the laughter, it had all been a cover. She had been poisoning me, slowly, deliberately. "We need to leave," I whispered to my friend. Emily noticed my unease, her smile faltering slightly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice smooth, but there was an edge to it now. "Nothing," I replied, standing. "I just forgot something at home." I left, heart pounding, head spinning. I couldn't believe what I had just discovered. The person I had trusted, who had seemed so charming, so loving, had been plotting harm against me. Every memory, every gesture suddenly took on a sinister light. For the next few days, I stayed away, working with my friend to ensure I was safe. I consulted with legal authorities discreetly, making sure I had protection in case Emily tried anything further. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just the poisoning, it was the deception, the way she had manipulated my trust so completely. Even friends who knew her were shocked. They had always admired her creativity and charm, never imagining the dark side she harbored. But I knew, and that knowledge made every interaction with her a potential threat. Eventually, I had to face her, not out of fear, but to reclaim control over my life. I arranged to meet in a neutral, public space, surrounded by people, making sure I wasn't alone. She greeted me with a smile, one that no longer fooled me. "I was starting to wonder if you'd come," she said. "I did," I replied, steadying my voice. "We need to talk." The conversation was tense, filled with careful words and unspoken threats. I confronted her calmly, explaining that I knew what she had done, that the authorities were involved, and that I would no longer allow her access to my life. Her reaction was a mixture of surprise and amusement, as if she hadn't expected to be caught. "You're persistent," she said finally. "I admire that, but you'll never understand why." "I don't need to," I said. "What matters is that you stop, and I'm done with you." She smiled, almost imperceptibly, and walked away. I felt a weight lift, a sense of relief mingled with lingering fear and disbelief. The weeks that followed were about rebuilding and recovery. I changed my routines, improved my security, and surrounded myself with friends and family I trusted. Therapy helped me process the betrayal, to understand that it wasn't my fault and that I deserved safety, honesty, and love. Looking back, it was surreal how close I had come to serious harm, and yet how lucky I was to have noticed in time. The experience left scars, yes, but also a clarity about trust, intuition, and boundaries. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the people who seem closest to you can be the most dangerous. The days after confronting Emily were tense, but strangely calm. I still felt the sting of betrayal, but I was determined to reclaim my life. It wasn't easy. Even with her gone, my mind kept replaying every smile, every casual joke, every seemingly innocent gesture from her as potential traps. The thought that someone I trusted could be so calculating haunted me. I threw myself into my routine, work, friends, family, but everything felt slightly off. Even familiar places seemed tainted, as if the city itself had witnessed what I'd gone through. My friends noticed. "You've been quiet," Jenna said one evening over dinner. Jenna was my closest friend, someone I'd leaned on during the whole ordeal. "I know what happened with Emily. You don't have to carry it alone." I smiled, grateful for her support. "I know. It's just hard to stop thinking about it. Everything feels different now." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "That's normal, but you're stronger than you realize. You survived something most people wouldn't even see coming." Her words were comforting, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of vigilance. Every new acquaintance, every casual invitation made me pause. Paranoia lingered like a shadow, but I refused to let it control me. Weeks later, life began to regain some semblance of normalcy. Work was demanding, as usual, but I found solace in small routines. Morning coffee at the local cafe, evening walks by the river, late-night calls with friends. Slowly, the trauma of Emily's betrayal began to feel like a chapter that was closing. Then one afternoon, I got an unexpected email. The sender was anonymous. The subject line simply, "We need to talk." My stomach sank. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend it never existed. But curiosity and a lingering sense of unfinished business won out. I opened it cautiously. "I know what you discovered. You think you're safe, but people like her don't just disappear. Meet me tomorrow at the park near 5th Avenue. Noon. Alone." I froze, heart racing. Who was this? A friend of hers? Someone trying to warn me? Or someone who was part of the same dark circle I hadn't known existed? After hours of deliberation, I decided to go. Not recklessly, but prepared. I informed a friend of my plan, leaving details of the location and time. I carried my phone fully charged, stayed aware of my surroundings, and kept calm. The next day, I arrived at the park early. The sun was bright, and children played in the distance, oblivious to the tension in my mind. I sat on a bench, scanning the area. Finally, a man approached, mid-30s, casual clothes, but eyes sharp and alert. "Are you the person I'm supposed to meet?" I asked cautiously. He nodded. "Yes. Call me Mark. I knew Emily a long time ago. Not in a friendly way. She's manipulative, dangerous, and, well, you were lucky to get away. But she isn't done, and I wanted to warn you." I felt a chill. "Done? How? What do you mean?" Mark pulled out a folder, placing it on the bench. Inside were pictures, emails, and messages that confirmed something I hadn't fully grasped. Emily had a network, subtle and insidious, of people she influenced, people she controlled. She had been grooming certain individuals for months, testing reactions, observing vulnerabilities, and I had been one of her experiments. "Why tell me this?" I asked, overwhelmed. "Because she's unpredictable," Mark replied. "She doesn't just stop. People think she's harmless until it's too late. You need to know what you're up against." The weight of his words hit me. My sense of betrayal had expanded into something far larger. Emily wasn't just a toxic ex-friend. She was part of a pattern, someone capable of orchestrating harm quietly, meticulously. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I'd already faced her once, survived, and walked away. But now, knowing there might be more at stake, the fear was deeper, sharper. What should I do? I asked Mark. "Stay vigilant. Protect yourself, and trust your instincts. You already did once, and it saved you." Over the following weeks, I began to take precautionary measures. I changed passwords, installed security systems, and kept personal interactions strictly in public spaces. But I also started documenting everything. Every suspicious message, every anomaly, every memory that didn't make sense until I pieced it together. I realized the importance of control. Emily had thrived because she manipulated situations where others felt powerless. I refused to give anyone that leverage over me again. Then, unexpectedly, life reminded me that it wasn't all paranoia. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received a call from an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, I know this is random, but I just want to say you've always been resilient. And seeing you go through everything with Emily, well, it reminds me why I value our friendship so much." The warmth in her voice broke through layers of fear and anxiety. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. "Thanks," I said. "It means a lot. Really." We ended up talking for hours, sharing stories, laughing, and reminiscing. It was a reminder that, even after betrayal and trauma, life had moments of light, of connection, of genuine human warmth. Over time, I rebuilt my world carefully and intentionally. I surrounded myself with people who had proven trustworthy, embraced routines that grounded me, and even started volunteering at a local community center. Helping others gave me purpose and a sense of control I hadn't felt since the days of Emily's manipulation. But there were lessons that stayed with me, sharp and unyielding. Trust is precious, intuition is powerful, and sometimes the people who seem closest can be the most dangerous. I carried that knowledge not as fear, but as vigilance, a guide to navigating life with awareness and courage. Looking back, the ordeal with Emily transformed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about betrayal. It was about resilience, about understanding human nature, and about reclaiming control when someone tries to take it from you. The scars remained, but they were badges of survival, reminders of strength. And now, every time I share this story, every time I recount the experience to friends or family, I feel a sense of closure, but also responsibility. I want others to understand, to recognize red flags, to trust themselves, and to protect what matters most. Life continues unpredictable as ever, but I've learned to navigate it with eyes wide open. I've learned that survival isn't just about physical safety. It's about mental clarity, emotional strength, and trusting your instincts. If you stuck with me through this story, thank you. Sharing these experiences takes courage, and knowing that people like you listen and learn from them gives me the motivation to keep creating more stories. Your support makes it possible for me to continue uncovering these intense, real-life experiences and sharing them with everyone. So if this story kept you engaged, don't forget to subscribe. It really motivates me to bring you more stories that are shocking, emotional, and unforgettable.